Monolith's Shadow of War was one of my favorite games at E3 this year. With an expanded Nemesis system and ridiculously talkative orcs, the sequel is shaping up very nicely. Hey guys, JV here sharing my thoughts on Shadow of War at E3 2017. As always, if you like what I do here and want to see more, be sure to subscribe. Before we start, I just want to share a bit of my experience. I got to see a private demo of the game at the Warner Brothers booth this year, led by one of the designers, I believe. It was someone who definitely knew their stuff, was very involved in the development of the game. And then I got to play 20-ish minutes of the game and start a fortress battle. And I didn't get to finish it due to time constraints. We had to finish up quickly and then go see the private presentation. So that's where I'm getting this information from. In this video, I'm going to share several observations that I picked up on by playing the game myself and also seeing that presentation. And the big thing that stood out above all for me is the Nemesis system, because it's still one of the most unique mechanics in the AAA space right now, and it worked out so fantastically in Shadow of Mordor. That game probably would have been praised nearly as much if this system didn't exist. And if you're a little rusty on Shadow of Mordor and Nemesis, before it would affect orcs around that you would encounter, they would remember certain actions that you took in battle, whether you burned their face or did something in particular to them, maybe chopped off their leg. That would affect the way you encounter them in the future, and they might hunt you down and let you know, like, hey, I remember you chopped off my leg, I'm going to kill you for that. It felt like you actually had an impact on the world and your actions mattered. It wasn't this scripted reaction, it was something that you yourself caused, and that's why it felt really unique for me. So in Shadow of War, they're taking it to the next level. They're calling it Nemesis System Evolved. Now you have Orc Followers, and these are named orcs like other ones that you would encounter in previous games, like, you know, whatever, the Strong or whatever it may be, but they have unique and randomized personalities and stories that are different in every single playthrough. So this means they're going to be super talkative. That's why I mentioned that specifically, because in the demos and the gameplay you've seen so far, the orcs have been so freaking talkative, they will not shut up. They have a little something to say 20 to 30 seconds every single time you talk to them. At first I thought that was weird, but then I realized this is that Nemesis system in action, but expanded. So these are not orcs that you're going to randomly encounter and then they're going to give you a long monologue. These are orcs that you're going to have a relationship with, and they're going to evolve as long as they're still alive and they don't die, right? In the demo that I saw, they started off by showing us a giant orc follower they recruited called Arnok the Hairy or something like that, but his little characteristic was that he was hairy, and he was legitimately hairy all over. He looked like a giant hairy ogre. This guy was just completely unique and had different characteristics compared to any of the other followers that they had, so he was a real asset and they recruited him. So again, with the follower system, it's really about the relationship with unique orcs that makes the experience different every single time, which I find to be very cool from a player standpoint, but also from a viewing standpoint. For example, on my channel, you know, a Twitch stream, someone else you might be watching, their experience is going to be different from my experience, and my experience is going to be different from yours. That's a really cool concept to me, especially in a game like this. Also part of the Nemesis system is what they call Nemesis Fortress. That's the big new flashy feature that you've probably seen. It's what I would call a 3-stage siege assault of an enemy stronghold that requires a good amount of preparation if you want to succeed. Throughout the game, you'll be building your forces by recruiting these followers who have their own army of men behind them, and then you'll be identifying the fortress's weaknesses all around this giant map that we saw, which looks really cool, and you'll adjust accordingly depending on those weaknesses, recruit different orcs that you'll need for that. Essentially, the whole Nemesis system is built around this fortress mechanic. Also, these fortresses will have different archetypes which determine what you will encounter, so there's certainly a strategy to it and something you're going to have to learn over the course of a playthrough. Like I said, due to time, I didn't get a chance to assault a fortress myself, but we did see the presentation demo of that. So in the demo, the first guy we had to take down at the fortress was weak to fire. That was something we could see immediately when we met him. And luckily, there was already a drake in the fortress in a cage that they were keeping. And so as Talion, the main character, we were able to dominate that drake, fly it around, and and burn our enemies. Drakes are one of the new massive creatures that you're going to be able to control and use against the weaknesses of whatever fortress that you're assaulting. So the Drake was the example in this one. Again, you can mount it and control it, which was really cool, or you can hop off and let the Drake do the work for you. Again, you have to dominate it, which is like the concept of dominating smaller orcs. You just apply that to these massive creatures and they will do your bidding. The first phase was also easier because we had already recruited an orc who was kind of like a sniper stealthy type to infiltrate the fortress and sabotage the wall. There was some kind of explosive something on the other side, and so he was able to go behind the wall, shoot that as we were attacking, and that blew up and opened a hole, allowing our forces to move in more quickly. There's definitely a huge sense of scale in this game that wasn't in previous games. You would encounter, you know, a good amount of orcs in certain areas in Mordor, but in Shadow of War there are, it feels like 100 different unique orcs on the screen at once, whether it be your forces or the enemy forces, which is really cool. It really is like in a siege assault. It was hard for me to remember the second phase because the Drake was absolutely destroying enemies. After, you know, the person playing the game hopped off of the Drake, it was a live demo, by the way, I forgot to mention that. It wasn't just a video or anything like that. The Drake was just destroying everything. It seems like a very powerful tool that will be super useful, especially if the weakness for that fortress and its opponents is in fact fire. I will say though that each phase has very specific goals. So for example, the first phase was to break through that first wall because this fortress had a certain kind of wall that needed to be broken through. It wasn't something that you could handle very easily. You had to do something very specific. So very specific objective for each phase. The second phase, I believe, was just to eliminate a certain group of powerful orcs, but again, the Drake took care of that very quickly. The final phase, of course, is to take down the chief that is ruling this fortress in his throne room. You have to kill him or dominate him, whichever you choose. And depending on the chief's personality within this whole Nemesis system, his throne room is actually designed according to their strengths and weaknesses. So for example, if instead of being weak to fire, they are immune to fire or they're resistant to fire, then their throne room is going to have a lot of flames shooting out of the ground or something crazy like that. So in the demo we saw, this chief was actually a smaller guy who rode a Korogor, an albino Korogor, and so it was a special kind of Korogor that was very strong. And since he was a small guy, I believe also he called for a lot of backup, and so that was kind of his thing, his archetype. The strategy to take out this chief was to kill his Korogor as quickly as possible because he was most powerful on top of it. So that's what the player did. Also, at the very top, this totally reminded me of Game of Thrones, the Red Wedding. All of a sudden, some archers came up from top as well and just rained down fire. So if you ever needed a breather, they could just go up there, kill those guys very quickly and regain some health. But it ended up that the player dominated and recruited the chief to their army to defeat Sauron. So not just killing the enemy, but actually dominating them and using them against the overall enemy of the game. In terms of overall presentation and enthusiasm, seeing this battle from start to finish with the designers, developers playing the game and talking about it throughout was one of the coolest things I saw at E3. Just some other side notes about the game, some differences that I noticed from the first one. The combat is still really solid and there's more options. Of course, we expect this in a sequel. We expect things to be expanded. That is certainly the case with Shadow of War over Shadow of Mordor. There's more insane options where you flip really quickly between the Bright Lord and Talion, the person you're playing as. For example, if you wanted to dominate an enemy but they're very far away, there's actually an ability where you can pull your bow out and teleport to them no matter how far they are away and instantly dominate them. Combat was another awesome aspect of the first game, and so it definitely looks promising in the sequel. They've also added this RPG element with gear drops, so you're going to see weapons, pieces of armor, different rings dropping that will enhance the player character with different abilities and upgrades and bonuses. And I was a little worried during the combat siege. I was like, are we really going to stop and equip things? That's really going to slow things down. But luckily, over the course of that battle, it's assumed that your army picks everything up. Everything that was dropped, you get picked up and brought to the player character. And so everything that does drop in battle, you will get to see and you will get to equip. So that's not going to slow things down. That's always something I'm worried about when they add these kinds of elements. So you have different kinds of slots for all different kinds of gear that will affect the player. The final thing that they've certainly talked about but not showed off is the larger open world and the new environments that are going to be a lot more varied. This is certainly an upgrade over the first game because it did feel that Shadow of Mordor and the place that it, the area was very dry and drab and kind of depressing. It was very gray. There was not much going on. The game was insanely fun to play, but not the prettiest to look at. In this game, they are having a lot more varied environments, a lot more water, and a lot more colorful things to look at. Needless to say, especially after seeing the game and playing it firsthand, I am sold on Shadow of War. I'm very excited to play the game. In the comment section below, let me know, do you plan to play Shadow of War? Is this a game on your radar? I know October is an insane month this year. There's like 6 games that I plan to pick up in that month alone because it's so crowded. So let me know what you're thinking in the comment section below. If you're still watching and you enjoy the video, click the like button and subscribe for more content like this. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook so you don't miss another video. Sign up with Juniper to receive exclusive discounts on shirts, hoodies, and more at the JV merch store. Click the link in the description below for more details. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.